Dreamweaver, Chapter 3, Rescue. Eva was positive Ainsley had to die. He must, and she would not feel the least bit guilty for his demise. Not one iota. Her only regret was that she could not kill him herself, at least not directly. She was no longer surprised that the boy wanted to go to Bleakman Square. This was the sort of place where rogues, bandits, and thieves gathered. A despicable lot where even the guardians rarely came to spread their faith. Ainsley would fit right in. What concerned her at the present was her compromising position, with her arms wrapped tightly around the jerk's body as the bird trotted unintelligently toward the city. The dimwits and blabbermouths would surely think she belonged to the boy. She couldn't help but blush at the humiliating thought. Thankfully, Ainsley hopped off the animal before they got to the entrance, and he further surprised her by holding out a hand to help her alight. "I need to talk to someone here," Ainsley said, his voice full of gravitas once more. "Stay close to me. I don't want you to be hurt on my account." She nodded appreciatively and immediately regretted conceding peace so soon. But this was not the place to draw attention. The personal feud had to be postponed. The streets were crowded, and the raw bickering and shouting deafened her. At times, a sea of people rushing by nearly separated Eva from Ainsley. "Stay in front of me," he shouted. She couldn't hear him, and he repeated, "Stay in front. It's safer." He nudged her forward, and his hand fell softly onto her shoulder, guiding her through the throng. They exited to an even smaller street, no more than an alleyway. There were no signs advertising the businesses, but Eva knew exactly what sins were conducted behind the closed doors simply by the musky smell of carnality that leaked out of the holes and cracks in the walls of these degenerate buildings. Without hesitation, Ainsley opened one of the wooden doors and entered. Eva followed him, the best she could in the dim light, until they came to a larger corridor. A monster of a man stood by a double door. His hand shot out as he saw Ainsley and her approach. "You can't—" Ainsley grasped the fingers on the man's hand and twisted until they cracked, bringing the giant to his knees. Two quick blows followed, both directed at the neck, and the large man collapsed without uttering a single sound. They entered the double door and swiftly deflated the joviality inside the room. Hostile glances glared their way. Ainsley didn't seem to notice as he scanned the room. A man in the far end stood up, eyes wide with fear as he stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. Bodies began to move, some away and others toward Ainsley. Eva followed at a safe distance. She was very aware of her vulnerable position, but luckily, Ainsley drew most of the attention. 3 men had formed a semicircle around him, and he slowed momentarily to order Eva to him. As soon as she got close, Ainsley sliced through the man in the middle and urged her in front while spinning around to defend the flanks. The fight ended seconds later with the men on either side falling lifelessly to the floor. None of the spectators dared move, and Ainsley caught the lapels of the fleeing man and flung him against the wall. "Where is she?" he demanded. The man was flushed with liquor, but his eyes were very alert. His whole body shook as spittle, tears, and snot fell. "I swear, I told you everything. The marauders. It's the marauders. They have her. I've been to the town by the garden, and I told you what would happen if I have to find you again. No, please." With these people, words were useless. Eva knew that from a young age, and Ainsley seemed to be of the same philosophy as he kicked at the man's knee, painfully dislocating the kneecap. A long, agonizing howl came from the man. This soon turned to a deep, guttural clack. "I see," Ainsley said as he pushed the man against the wall. "I'm not going to dislocate the other one. I'm going to slice it off with my sword." "No, no," the man howled. His head hung as he wrestled with the consequences of telling versus not telling. It was merely a matter of who to betray. Ainsley had no patience and reached for his blade. The man heard the clink of Ainsley's sword as it slid out of its sheath a second time and clamored for mercy. "Remington Settlement. They're taking her to Remington Settlement along with the other women. You've already cost me 5 days. Remington is 10 days on foot." The metal of the blade scattered the weak light as Ainsley lifted it toward the ceiling. "I have a jeep. Here, take it." The man rummaged through his pockets, produced a set of keys. "It's near the empty lot at the front end." Ainsley's sword slashed down and opened a deep gash across the man's thighs, just missing his knee. The man fell over, clutching at the new wound. Ainsley turned around, and the men swiftly parted to allow him space. He looked at the women. Fear and shame showed in their eyes. The women are free, Ainsley announced. No one dared to contradict him, but none of the women moved. Freedom was a word lost to them. Get out. Now! The loud shuffling of feet followed as the women, finally realizing the reality of the situation, fled. Eva and Ainsley exited after them. Who was that? Someone who deals with the marauders, Ainsley answered. Are you scared? No. Growing up, I've seen plenty of men like those. Of me, I meant. Why? You saved those women. Ainsley shook his head and sighed. Many will be recaptured. By them, by others. Perhaps some will make it, he said, offering a little glimmer of hope. To them or himself, Eva thought. They navigated through the overcrowded streets until they reached the outer limits of the city. Piles of junk and trash strung out into a makeshift barricade. At the far end, under a large sheet of synthetic plastic, was the outline of a jeep. Had Ainsley not known where to look, it would have been well hidden, surrounded by a large number of disabled vehicles. The men didn't lie this time, and the jeep jumped to a start. Soon, Blickman Square receded into the night. Eva had not traveled in a running vehicle since her early childhood when the ashes started to fall. Allowing the wind to hit her face brought back some of the memories. Her family took plenty of trips, along the coast, across the state lines, and even down past the border too. She used to hate those trips, stuck in a car for endless hours. Dad always came up with silly games to play. She fussed over it each time, but deep down, she liked it. There was certainly something about saying nonsense and loving every moment about it because of the people. Eva wanted to see them, not just mother and father, but also her grandparents and cousins and... So many people had died, and she was all alone. Everyone who loved her and whom she loved was dead. There was no one to share her secrets, no one to annoy, no one to hug, no one. She cried herself to sleep on countless nights, but the loneliness never faded. There were no dreams to help her remember, only blackness. A dense fog of nothing, emptiness. She felt a tear roll down her cheeks and quickly brushed it away. Hey, Ainsley said, logic question. She looked at him incredulously. What are you? Shh, he hushed. A man brushes his teeth and whistles at the same time. How's that possible? She thought for a second and then laughed. So stupid, she muttered. What is it? Tell me. You're a dork. So, you don't know. I'll tell you the answer. He has dentures. It's an old man brushing his dentures. Ainsley smiled as if it were the first time he heard it. Okay, another one. No, how about 2 truths and a lie? Fine, you start. When I was a child, before all this, I used to love drumstick ice cream cones. I hated hazelnuts. And I always ate my cereal with soy milk. Ew, that is sick. Drumstick ice cream cones? Soy milk in your cereal? He laughed. You seem to be the type to hate anything, especially when it comes to food. So the hazelnut bit is false. What do you mean, quote unquote, when it comes to food? She sneered, shaking her head. Anyway, whatever. Your turn. I'm the kindest person in the world. I'm the most amazing man ever. I'm sitting next to a monkey who can barely climb trees. Eva turned and slapped him hard across the shoulder. You can't tell all lies. It's not all lies. You just have to find the right one. Do you sleep? Eva yawned as she woke. I have lost a lot of time. I have to save her. The muscles on his face pulled tight, and his lips thinned. Eva knew the person must be of great importance to him. Girlfriend? Family. She's like a sister to me. He said no more. There was an intense focus in his eyes that scared Eva. She had seen it last night when they barged into the brothel. Ainsley was more than capable of exerting violence. Yet, there was something else. His hands nervously wrung the steering wheel, and his eyes, those old, sad eyes, peered hopefully into the horizon. It was fear, but fear of a very specific kind. Eva rested against the seat. The feeling resonated with her, and inexplicably, she knew his pain. There was so much hurt in this world, but all of it was buried. We aren't human if we can't feel pain anymore. The thought terrified her. The ashes that fell had transformed them all. The immense pain of loss and longing still throbbed, but no one attended to it. They masked it in violence and bathed it in cynicism or covered it with apathy, as Eva did. Not many people could feel anymore, for there was too much nerve-numbing hurt. The ashes had buried humanity long ago. She looked at Ainsley and wondered how terrifying it must have been to still fear loss, to still have hope. Eva touched his shoulder, and he turned. Her hand quickly withdrew. "I'm sorry," she said, confused over what she had done. "We'll find her for sure," he forced a smile. "A caravan can't travel fast." His smile broadened. "Absolutely right. I like your thinking. Another day or two, and we'll catch up. I'll play devil's advocate and say 3. Loser has to grant the winner a wish." "Anything?" "Anything. Deal. So is it a day or 2? Day and a half. Done." 2.5 days and numerous gas containers later, they caught the caravan. The jeep sputtered its last breath a quarter of a mile ago, but that was fine. Ainsley had cut across a hill and hiked the remainder to wait for the caravan. Eva lay hidden behind a large boulder. "You ambushed them," Ainsley said. That was not going to happen, unarmed as she was, but Eva was delighted to see him recover some of his humor. Come to think of it, she was at a loss as to why she thought of him as impassively granite-like before. The humming of the engine momentarily stole her attention. A large flatbed converted to hold an iron cage turned around the bend, allowing her to catch a glimpse of the miserable creatures inside. The women, dirtied and dejected, held on to the sides of the bars as the truck bounced along the uneven road. Some had barely more than rags on their backs, and the sign of abuse were already evident from the bruises on their faces to the cuts on their arms and legs. None of the violence was new to Eva, and she had seen it numerous times in countless women. Ainsley's friends shared much of her compatriots' wounds, but none of their sorrow. The singular trait allowed Eva to quickly identify her. The woman's luscious blonde mane was tied in a ponytail, conspicuously displaying everything that made her aristocratic face beautiful. Her large round eyes, straight narrow nose, prominent cheeks, and beautifully proportioned lips. She clutched against the bars as did the other women, but there was no defeat in her posture. Her shoulders stood high and her head held high. Every bit of her spoke of defiance. Pride was etched into her soul and shone naturally, radiantly. When Eva looked back, Ainsley was gone. He had simply disappeared. The truck was coming toward them, and behind it, a sports utility vehicle. Eva glanced nervously about. If the caravan passed them by, it would be impossible to follow without a vehicle. Neglecting her position, she darted into the middle of the road. "Stop!" she commanded. Surprisingly, or perhaps not so surprisingly, the men stopped, seeking to add another woman to their collection. When she saw a man exit the vehicle, eye shards ran through her veins. He was a burly beast with a large rifle slung across his back. His eyes sparkled with sadism as he eyed her ravenously. Eva retreated several steps and looked around lost. Then suddenly, gunfire roared in the background. The men turned and ran back, but it was too late. Eva watched him disappear, only to reappear moments later, thrust across the field. His body rolled to a stop, and he would never move again. She heard the loud clank of metal and saw the large band of women scattered like insects under an overturned rock. Instantly, they were gone, save the blonde, who walked calmly toward the front of the truck and ducked inside. Moments later, she produced a shotgun, breaking it to load the shells. Eva jumped as she heard the loud weapon fire, 4 times, one for each of the men. She returned with Ainsley. "Where were you?" Eva demanded. "Missy, this is Eva." The blonde extended her hand and a faint smile appeared on her face. Pleasure to meet you, Eva said, clasping the woman's hand. Likewise, you're a brave girl. The words reminded Eva of her ongoing anger and she glowered at Ainsley. Well? I was hiding. I prefer tact, but sometimes a brutish display of force, as you have shown, works as well. You could have gotten me killed. He won't, Missy interjected. How? Missy had already turned away, heading toward the two vehicles. Ainsley softly tugged at Eva's elbow. I won't, he said. I won't ever let anything happen to you. For a moment, as his gaze lingered on her, she almost believed the sincerity of his words. Then he added, Only because you make a darn scary ghost, and most certainly vengeful one too. Before Eva could say anything to him, Ainsley sprinted away. So, what happened? Ainsley asked. Don't talk about it, Missy replied. Eva saw the proud woman's eyes glance down embarrassingly. She almost begged for Ainsley to pursue the issue to incur Missy's ire, but he didn't and simply nodded understandingly. Happens to everyone, he said, and looked at Eva. Although there was nothing condescending in his gesture, Eva was annoyed nonetheless. The benefit of doubt no longer belonged to him. The three of them climbed into the flatbed. For a brief moment, there was a short, solemn silence. Then Missy spoke, but her tone only added to the gravity of the situation. I think we're being tracked. We're always being tracked, Ainsley answered. And Eva felt the exhaustion in his words. If the past few days were any indication of the life he led, then it wasn't a life at all. Even Eva had brief moments of respite when she was able to disappear to other cities and live off her past earnings. Suddenly, Eva was taken by the realization that this was to be her life as well, as she had thrown in her lot with Ainsley. By whom? Eva blurted nervously. Both Ainsley and Missy turned to look at Eva, and by the stunned expressions on their faces, they had completely forgotten about her in the back seat. They stared at one another, and Eva figured she had overstepped her boundaries. Just curious. You don't have to tell me. It's okay, Ainsley said. Nothing you probably haven't guessed at anyway. I'm not exactly inconspicuous in my likes and dislikes. He smiled, then offered the explanation. We track the Guardians, more specifically the Faithfuls, and they have people who track us. The Faithfuls? Eva's heart almost fell through. She suddenly hoped and prayed that this was one of his ill-humored jokes to get her in a fit. All 12 of them. Ainz has been trying to find their whereabouts, Missy confirmed, and Eva lost her heartbeat. Why? She stuttered. Her head reeled from the insanity of their proposition. The Faithfuls were survivors of the ashes, personally saved by their great purity. Of the Guardians, they held immense sway and unimaginable power. The situation was already bad as it was, with Ainsley walking around in a color decried by the Guardians as evil and contemptuous. As if on cue, Missy produced a red armband and slipped it around her arm. Well, you've got a new plan? We're gonna make them come to us, strategically, of course. But why? Eva asked again. Aren't the Guardians protecting us from foragers and marauders? They're helping to reestablish order and restore peace. Missy laughed cynically, and Ainsley looked away. But Eva still saw the pained expression on his face from the reflection in the window. I'm sorry, Eva said. She was still having a difficult time comprehending the situation. Don't feel bad, Missy said. Most people worship the Guardians like gods, but the hypocrisy stinks more than foragers should. Where to now? Eva asked. We're going to meet one of the Faithfuls. What? Don't worry, Ainsley remarked. This one saved me. Thanks for staying and listening until the end. Let me know what you think of the story so far in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get alerts on new chapters. Also, if so inclined, you can buy me coffee or preferably boba on Ko-fi. Link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in and see you next week.